dynamic. I mean, the big-ass bad guys, David Warner coming in with the kind of, I don't know what the sunglasses budget on the show alone is. The woman at the noir scene had those glasses, looked like she was going through radiation. But that was really, I thought, I don't know, again, when you see these things in time, you start to notice things, particularly because they're not done that way.
Right.
You know, and that's,
I mean, I think of Russ Tamblyn as the psychiatrist. Oh my God. You know.
He gave us the story of the glasses when he was here a few weeks ago. So
kind of trying on 2 pairs in Venice Beach, and eventually deciding that it created this kind of psychedelic effect.
interesting how actually are glasses considered wardrobe or props?
It's one of those gray areas, usually props, but it's a gray area.
So let's maybe talk about some of the ways in which you have to restructure a series that it has such a fundamentally murder mystery plot once it's no longer so much a mystery and more of a thriller or a comedy, all these other things. What was, I mean, in many ways that changes the structure of how the show's going to play out because certain elements aren't there anymore. Did you guys sort of discuss genre at all, like how this was going to evolve beyond the mystery element of it?
well, I mean, I think famously David and Mark didn't want to have the murder solved. I mean, David ever. And I think Mark probably had a slightly different time frame on that. But that was the thing. They didn't really want to solve it, and I think we all knew that that was going to create problems because you had this huge, I mean, Laura Palmer, I mean, the whole thing. And so it was, you know, that after when you were done with that, it was really about bringing in other stories, and I think some worked, some didn't. And it was, we tried to bring in a new villain, and I think Kenneth Walsh was so great, so that really did help. But I think it was very difficult in the second season. You know, I think there was a sort of kind of figuring it out all over again. And again, as I make fun of like the noir thing, but I mean that was one of those things. Okay, well, maybe James will do this, and how will we? And it's you start to get away from the core relationships, and I think in any television show that becomes problematic because you don't want you want to see the diner and you want to see those different characters and you want to get them to that third season and see how you're going to do it then. But it was tough, and the the thing with Kyle and that storyline going away was a difficult one for us. I think the writers were all very excited about writing it. So you had to kind of come up with various things, and there was Mark going away, which he actually said to my son just last month, and said that was one of his only regrets about the show, was that he wished, in fact, he hadn't gone off to make that movie, because it was in his absence it became harder for him to kind of do the work that he had done previously, and particularly do it with David, and it left me unmediated, so I was dealing with David in ways that I hadn't before, and there was good and bad times involved in that. And so that was, and so because it gets complicated.
Sure.
And I think that's reflected in a certain amount of storytelling.
Michael, how come we never meet your PhD girlfriend on the show?
Good question. we never get any girlfriends. Basically as a native person. I was doing the Untouchable series, and I'm one of the Untouchables. These guys had houses and history, and I said, well, where do I live? I don't know why. Maybe if it would have gone on, we would have been introduced. It's really funny. I met David. Didn't remember that I met him, but I used to hang with Russ Tamblyn and Dean Stockwell and Dennis Hopper, and I were all real close friends. And I met David in the '70s, and they said, "Who's that guy?" And they ran the film The Grandma for me, and I went, "Oh." And then we had done The Cowboy and the Frenchman. I said, "What are you going to do next?" He says, "TV series." And I said, "For cable?" He said, regular television. I went, "Yeah, right. Call me when that happens." But he's an interesting man. Very, very kind to actors.
One character that gets alluded to that I'm surprised never shows up is James's mother. Was that ever something that you guys discussed?
Leslie, I have no memory of James's mother. So.
I don't really remember. I know she was discussed, but I don't remember any discussion of her ever appearing, or she was kind of this, she was out there, but she, it made him torch. Is what it always felt like he was the motherless kid.
Tim Hunter shot that.
Tim Hunter directed it, it was shot in the
What?
Oh.
Really?
Yeah.
What's the story?
Wow, really?
James actually talked about it, before James Marshall. It was
was Leslie.
In my episode, really? Wow, that's crazy.
And the actress was named, I think it was Linda Carlson. And James did the whole scene with her. He said he was pretty much standing outside of the trailer, and they had the full dialogue that she was setting the phone when she was drunk, and had some guy in the car with her. That's why, Leslie, in your episode, they have the line where James says, "My mom came home."
Yes,
That was because they were going to insert the scene that Tim Hunter directed with the actor.
I never saw that scene. Well, it's good to know.
So you've seen the show.
Hey, thank you for the info.
Well, speaking of deleted material, I'm curious, Peggy, we heard from Mary Sweeney last week about a scene that she loved from Fire Walk With Me between you and Ed. Can you tell us about some of the stuff that you shot for the movie that didn't make it in?
Everything. I don't think I was even in the movie. I really
There's one scene at the
at the
diner.
diner, right? I was just thinking about that shoot and another incident of David's protectiveness. The only time I ever lost my cool from all the years that I've worked was with one of our producers. It wasn't, thank God it wasn't Harley, because I'd be really so embarrassed right now. But he was a young guy. He was very close to David. I know his name if I remember. He was a very young guy, and he was on Fire Walk With Me, and he was also on the shows. I think they're figuring it out.
Yeah.
Greg Feinberg.
Greg.
Greg, it could easily be Greg.
And I was on Fire Walk With Me, and we'd gone up to Seattle, I guess. But we were like way in the woods for that shoot. And there was a wonderful scene that, I don't know if Harley wrote it or David wrote it, but of me and Ed in the car. It was a wonderful scene in the car. I think the top was down, and it was a night shoot, and it was just sort of us telling each other how much we loved each other. It was beautiful. And I had a fight with Greg where I threw a book at him. I've never done anything like that. You know, luckily it wasn't a computer, but it was a book because there weren't computers. And that night, I'd already been in Seattle for like 3 nights. I hadn't worked, but that was fun. I liked being around David. It was so friggin' cold up there, and there was no heater in my trailer. All actors have the same story. No heater in the trailer, and I kept saying to Greg, do you think I could get a heater? Do you think I could just get a space heater? Do you think I could get an extra coat? Is there an extra blanket? And the whole night was going on, and it was like 1, 2, 3 in the morning, and I had like a 7 o'clock call. And I kept saying to Greg, when will I be working? When will I be working? And all of a sudden, I hear David outside of my trailer going, you can't treat our actors like that. I'm going to shoot that scene right now. He'd forgotten. He had gotten under pressure for the whole shoot. And he said he couldn't be more apologetic that we had been there all night. And he shot the scene. I have no idea why I didn't make it in. I would think because Fire Walk With Me became such a crystallized, kind of scary, almost like a facade of itself. I can't even explain it. I just didn't see humanity in that particular film. I just didn't. I know it was scary, and I know Twin Peaks followers loved it. I just think that scene was taken out because it kind of brought you down to like 2 people who were horny for each other who still couldn't get it together after all those years. So that was my thought. I know it was a great scene because I felt it. So that's all I know about that.
I have a deleted scene story. Yes. My deleted scene story from Fire Walk With Me is Howling at the Moon. And I was in this cabin that had 3 walls, and we were out, and it must have been the same night. And it was really, really cold, and David said, can you howl at the moon and cry? And it was, the lamenting of what had happened to this young woman who the log lady was very fond of. And we had a nice relationship. So, and she was always good to the log. And so I sat in this rocking chair and howled and cried. And it was like snot crying, not easy, right? And a long time, many, many, many takes. And, David kept going, oh, good, Kat, that's perfect, let's do it again. And So it was a real effort, and it was about 3 or 4 in the morning. And then I went to the screening of the movie, and it wasn't in. In fact, I'm barely in it. I think I'm in Fire Walk with Me a little bit, right? I haven't seen it in a long time, but anyway, I was disappointed. So I'm hoping that at some point they'll do deleted scenes from Fire Walk with Me, and we can see Peggy's scene in the car, and we can see my snot crying scene.
Well, I have to say, I don't have any deleted scenes, but I had a scene that was never shot because I was actually cast as Leland Palmer's dancing secretary, and you wardrobe me. No, well, that I was in that one. So they were so far behind, and I was in the trailer waiting. I was in wardrobe, and I had gone to hair, and I'm sitting there looking at my watch, because when does a director ever get put in the trailer waiting to be called in? It was actually a great learning experience. I'm like, what are they doing on that set? Why haven't they called me? What is taking so long? And they were so far behind, I never shot the scene. But I was in the scene. I forgot about that. I was the hunchback. And yes, yes, I was actually in One-Eyed Jacks.
One-Eyed Jacks, and so when Audrey had the white outfit.
Yes, and no one recognized me. Right. And I had a hairnet.
Right.
And a hunchback, and a very big mole with the hair sticking out of it, and bright pink lipstick that was way over my lips.
In watching it, there were a lot of crew members that were placed in the show. Mike Malone was in the show.
Oh, yeah.
The guy, Craig, the first Wyndham Earl. Have you seen the Wyndham Earl?
Yeah.
The first guy.
Craig McLaughlin.
Yeah, Craig was in it. It was interesting to watch and remember how many crew members, none to mention Frank Allegro, who played Killer Bob, but certainly was a crew member.
And we, I heard this story from Josh earlier today that Greg Feinberg plays Tim Pinkle's brother, that in a scene that didn't wind up making it into the show.
Greg Feinberg and I posed for a picture in Flesh World. And I remember there being a cowboy hat and a dog collar.
You can only imagine what the word
I worked, I know, really. I worked a couple of years ago with Greg on True Blood, or for like the last 3 seasons. So we've laughed about that picture. What happened to that Flesh World picture?
And also, our guest from last week, Jeff Moore, was the bearded guy in Flesh World. You guys remember? Imagine that if you guys were here last week.